When we talk about the history of Taiwan, the story almost always kicks off in one particular year, 1624, with the arrival of the Dutch. But what if I told you that's not the first chapter? Not even close. Today, we're going to rewind the clock way back to uncover the rich, complex, and deeply connected world of pre-colonial Taiwan.
To really understand Taiwan, we have to look past this 1624 myth. We're going to dive into the long and dynamic history that shaped the island for centuries, even millennia, before any European ships ever saw its shores. So that brings us right to the heart of it, the big question for today's explainer. What was life actually like on the island before that famous date? Who were the people living there? And what were their societies all about? And wow, the contrast here is just night and day. The old myth, right, it paints this picture of a primitive, disconnected island just waiting for outsiders to arrive. But the reality? Oh, it's a completely different story. We're talking about a place that was not only highly developed on its own terms, but was also a crucial heartland for one of the most widespread groups of people on Earth. And this is where the story gets huge. Seriously, this isn't just an island story. This was the starting point, the cradle, for an epic human journey that would eventually span half the globe. First off, what do we even mean when we say Austronesian peoples? Well, we're talking about this massive group, connected by language and ancestry, that stretches all the way from Madagascar to Easter Island. And all the modern research, we're talking linguistics, archaeology, genetics, it all points back to one single ancestral homeland, Taiwan. Picture this. About 6,000 years ago, people set out from Taiwan in what is one of the most incredible sea migrations in human history. These were master navigators. Over thousands of years, they settled the Philippines, Indonesia, and then just kept going, eventually reaching the farthest corners of the Pacific, places like Hawaii, New Zealand, and all the way to Easter Island. It's just amazing. So, while their descendants were busy populating the Pacific, you might be wondering what was happening back in Taiwan. While the island itself was home to its own continuous, evolving story of civilization that stretches back for thousands and thousands of years. Just look at this timeline. The sheer depth of history here is incredible. You can see this clear progression, from early hunter-gatherers to the beginnings of farming, and then, with the Bainan culture, something really remarkable happens. We see evidence of a complex society, amazing artistry, and even social classes. And by the time of the Neomatical culture, you've got settled villages and advanced agriculture. That's thousands of years of continuous development. And get this, does this look like the work of a primitive people? No way. This little figure, carved from precious jade, was found in a burial site that's 3,000 years old. This isn't just a tool. It's proof of sophisticated craftsmanship, deep artistic expression, and probably some really complex spiritual beliefs. Okay, so with all that deep history behind them, what did their society actually look like as we get closer to that 1624 date? Well, it was far from chaotic. We see these highly organized communities with very clear structures for daily life, for governance, and for work. So the basic building block of society was something called the Shi, which was basically a community of related families. And they weren't ruled by some absolute king from on high. Leadership was often based on consensus. Chiefs were chosen because they earned it, through their wisdom, or their bravery, or their skill. Each of these communities was its own self-governing unit, navigating this really complex world of alliances and rivalries with its neighbors. And within these communities, life was really well organized, with a clear, gendered division of labor. Typically, men handled things like hunting, building, and defense, while women were the masters of agriculture, weaving, and running the household. Now, this wasn't about one being more important than the other. It was a complementary system, where both halves were absolutely essential for the community to survive and thrive. And don't think for a second their economy was simple. These were people with advanced agricultural techniques, like crop rotation. They were incredibly skilled hunters and fishers. And that master craftsmanship we saw with the jade, that extended to everything from practical pottery and intricate baskets to beautiful woven textiles. This was a mature and diverse economy. All right, that brings us to the other big myth we need to bust wide open. This idea that Taiwan was some lost island, totally isolated and cut off from the rest of the world until the Europeans stumbled upon it. So the common story would have you believe the answer is yes, right? The Dutch were the first outsiders to ever set foot on Taiwan. But is that really the whole story? Not.
even close. The Dutch weren't just late to the party, they arrived in a region that was already buzzing with activity.
You see, for centuries, long before any Dutch ship was on the horizon, the peoples of Taiwan were active players in the region. They had a steady trade going with merchants from the Fujian coast of China, swapping things like deerskin for iron tools and ceramics. They had contact with the Ryukyu Kingdom, what's now part of Japan, and of course with their Austronesian cousins down in the Philippines. The waters around Taiwan were basically a maritime highway for traders, fishermen, and yeah, even pirates.
So, why is this so important? Why does all this matter? Well, because when you rewrite this first chapter of Taiwan's story, it fundamentally changes how you understand everything that comes after. It gives the island's original inhabitants their rightful place in history, not as passive bystanders, but as the main characters of their own story.
So, let's wrap this up. Before 1624, Taiwan was the cradle of the entire Austronesian world. It was home to diverse and ancient cultures. It had complex social structures and a sophisticated economy. And it was an island deeply connected to the rest of Asia through trade and travel. In short, it was anything and everything but primitive or isolated. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. If this is the true first chapter, how does it change the rest of the story we thought we knew? Recognizing this deep history isn't just like adding a new preface to a book. It forces you to reread the entire thing with a fresh perspective. It reframes colonialism, it reframes migration, it reframes the very identity of the island today. It asks us to see 1624 not as a beginning, but as a dramatic interruption of a story that was already thousands of years in the making.